So today's video is on multiplication of whole numbers and decimal numbers. So let's start off to gain an understanding of what multiplication is. So multiplication is when you multiply something or increase something. So let's say I have a bowl of candy and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candies in that bowl. So I have one bowl of candies and I have 5. So I want to multiply it by 2. So I want to increase this bowl by 2. So I'm going to get another bowl. And in that bowl, I'm going to put 5 more candies. And if I put 5 more candies in my second bowl, it means now I have a total of 10 candies. So that means I know that 5 multiplied by 2 is 10. And I can keep going. I can say, okay, so I'm going to add a third bowl, and I'm going to say, in that third bowl, again, I'm going to add another 5 candies. And now I say, I go ahead and once again, I go, okay, so then I add another 5 to that, and that equals 15. And so I say, let's say, what is 5 times 3, and 5 times 3 is 15. And to help you with multiplication, you can always use your multiplication table, which you have. And again, we use the multiplication table by finding the numbers we're looking for on it. So if we're saying 5 times 3, here's my 5 times table right here. 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 was 15. So I know that that's how I got that number. And I can use this to help me do multiplication when I'm looking at multiplication of larger numbers. So the next thing we're going to talk about is multiplication and how multiplication and division are inverse operations or opposite operations. So let's look at this multiplication question here. I'm going to show you how to do this 2 ways. One way is using the box model. And so we've learned about place value already. So we know that when we have 15, 15 is made up of 2 numbers. It's made up of 10 and 5. So 5 is my ones, and this is my tens, and then 23 is made up of 20, and it's made up of 3. So if I was using the box model, I would break my numbers down into their place value parts, and then I have my 20, and I have my 3 here. And then all you do is you go ahead and you multiply. So I know that when I do 20 times 10, I know that to again make it easier, look at your ones values, and so I have my 20, instead of looking at 20 times 10, I'm looking 2 times 1, and 2 times 1 is 2, and the number of zeros I have, again, is 1 0 here and 1 0 here, so I'm going to add 2 zeros to this number, so it's 200. Then I have 20 times 5, and again I go 2 times 5, and 2 times 5 is 10, and then I'm adding that next 0 that's there, so that's 100. Then I go, what's 3 times 10? Again, 3 times 1 is 3, and I'm adding that 0. And then what is 3 times 5? And again, if you don't know, look at your multiplication table, but we just talked about it on the previous screen, so it's 15. And so I'm not done here. What I need to do now is I've got all my values in this box. So this is my box model, so I've got all my values in my box. All I have to do is add them all up. And so in order to add them all up, I can put them in order if I wanted to, so I can go 200 plus 100 and then 30 and 15, and then I just go 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 5 is 5, 3 plus 1 is 4, and 2 plus 1 is 3. So my answer is going to be 345. So this is the first way you can do it. So this is method 1. The second way I can do it is the traditional multiplication method, which is taking the numbers and putting them on top of one another. And the way I like to do this, just to help, I'm just going to go back to the green here, to help you out here is to just draw some lines so that I can separate my values. And sometimes this helps in order to look at a number. And so this might be an easier way for you to look at it if you want to do this method. So I'm going to go back to a different color. So I go, what's 3 times 5? 3 times 5 again is 15. I put down my ones. I carry my tens. Then I go, what is 3 times 1? That's 3 plus 1 is 4. So I'm done with my 3. I'm moving on to my 2. And that's why that X is there. That X value says no number is going to go here. I'm going to start underneath my 4, which is underneath my 2. So 2 times 5 is 10. I put down my 0. I carry my 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So that's where my 3 comes from. And then I say I'm going to add it. So 5 times no value is 5. 4 plus 0 is 4. And 3 alone is that. So again, I got the same answer. So I got my answer as 345. So this is the 2 methods of doing it. Now here I said that you could use an inverse operation of division to find out if your multiplication is correct. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to have to clear some of this screen though. So hopefully you've copied this down. So I'm going to clear one side of the screen. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to erase this out. Oh, it's not working for me. There we go. Let's get some of that off that screen so I can have some space to work. So I'm going to put this now into a division statement so I can see if I end up with my answer. So let's pick another color. So I'm going to say I'm going to divide 15 by 15 into, so 345 by 15. And so I'm going to divide 345 into 15 equal parts, and what I should end up with is the 23 here. I should end up with 23. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you're doing this, I go into the question, I say, okay, 3. So what you should be doing is you should be covering up, and I'm just going to use an eraser to kind of show us. I should be covering up these 2 digits first. So I should cover those up. I should only see 15 by 3. And I say, okay, 15 by 3, does it go, in the 15 times tables, do I get 3? No, I don't. So then what I do is I uncover the next value that's there, and we know the next value was 4. So the 4 shows up again. I say, okay, so does 15 go into 34? Yes, it does, and the closest it gets to it is 2 times. I know 15 times 2 is going to be 30, so I'm going to put that number down. And then we subtract, and I'm left with a 4. And then we uncover the next number. Remember, there was another number there. So I uncovered that number, and it was a 5. And I said, okay, so now I'm going to bring down this 5, and now I have 45. Now, 15 goes into 45 how many times? I know 15 goes into, in the 15 times tables, in order to get 30, I'm able to go 3 times. How about if I multiply that by 3? So I know that 5 times 3 is 5 times 3 is 15, and then I have that 1 that I have to carry. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, so it's 45, and I have a remainder of 0. So you see you got the number 23, and that's why it's an inverse operation. So let's try our next question, and again, I'm going to show you this 2 ways, but I'm going to show it to you after you try it. So you're going to try multiplying that number, and you can use the box method or you can use the traditional multiplication method, either one, and then you're going to see if you got the correct answer. Again, use the inverse operation to find out if you've gotten it correct. Okay, so pause the video. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to really quickly show you this with the box method first. So I'm going to break this number down into its 3 parts. So 300, 20, and 5, and then I draw my box, which would be right here, and I have my parts. Hopefully I've left enough space there. And then my 18 is broken into, sorry, this is not letting me write here. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, I'm going to write on this side because it's not letting me write here. 18 is broken into 10 and 8. So I'm going to go, what is 10 times 300? And I know all I have to do is, again, multiply that first value with the first value, which is 3, and then just add up the zeros. I have 1, 2, 3 zeros, so I'm going to add 3 zeros to that. So it's going to be 3, 1, 2, and 3 zeros. Then I go, what's 20 times 10? And again, it's 2, and then 2 zeros. And then 5 times 10 is 5 and 1 0. Then I go down to my next line and I say, what is 8 times 300? And oh my gosh, that's really hard, right? So I just go, what is 8 times 3? I know what 8 times 3 is. It's 24. And then again, how many zeros? Only 2 zeros. And then what's 8 times 2? 8 times 2 is 16. And then just the 1 0. And what's 8 times 5? 8 times 5 is 40. And then again, you take all of these numbers and you add them up. So I've got my 3,000, my 2,400, and this is where the previous video where we talked about adding large numbers comes in very handy because you already know how to do this. And I'm going to list all of them, but I don't think I'm going to have enough space to show you the addition. But if I do add all of this up, I end up with 5,850. And so that's going to be my multiplication answer, and I'm going to show you this in the multiplication method as well so you can see it both ways. And so if I have 325 times 18, again, what you can do is you can go ahead and draw those lines if they're helpful to break those numbers apart. And I know I'm going to have two columns. I know that this one is going to have no value. I know there's going to be a plus sign here, and then I can go ahead and start filling in the blanks. So you might want to draw in that first before you start doing multiplication. It just might be easier for you. If it's not easier for you, then don't use that method. So I go back and I say, okay, what is 8 times 5? 8 times 5 is 40. I put down my 1s. I carry my 10s. 8 times 2, what is 8 times 2? 8 times 2 is 16, plus 4, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Again, I put down my 0, I carry my 2, so I put down my 1s, I carried my 10s. What is 8 times 3? 8 times 3 is 24, 24 plus 2, so 24 in my head, the bigger number in your head, the smaller number on your fingers to make it easier. So 24 in my head, 24, then add 2 more, 25 and 26, so I put that number down. Then I go down to, so again, can't put anything underneath the 8, so I'm moving underneath my 1 now. So now I go this way. What is 1 times 5? That's 5. And then I go 1 times 2, that's 2. And 1 times 3, which is 3. And I end up with that number. And I know that I'm going to be adding it because I've already written that there. So that's 0. 0 plus 5 is 5. 6 plus 2 is 6. And then 7 and 8. I put down my 8. And then 2 plus 3 is 5, and you see that I ended up with the same answer. So it doesn't matter if you use the box method to help you. If this works for you, then go ahead and use that. If this works for you, then go and use that. But you need to select a method that works for you. So whatever is easier for you, that's the method you're going to stick with. So at the beginning of the video, I said that we are also going to look at multiplication of decimals, and so that's what I'm going to do now. So I've given you a number, and again, I'm going to show it to you both ways. And in order to show you both ways, again, when we see this decimal multiplication right now, we're going to ignore it. We're going to pretend it doesn't exist, okay? And in order to use that box method, we do need to ignore it so that we can go ahead and break down those numbers. So we're going to look at this like it's 252. So my first value is 200, my next value is 50, and my following value is 2. So I've broken it down when I'm expanding it. So I've expanded that number, and it turns into 250 and 2. And then again, I expanded my next one, which is 10 and 3. And I drew my boxes in just like I would. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. So again, 200 times 10, so 2 times 1 is 2, and then I add my 3 zeros. 5 times 1 is 5, and this time there's 2 zeros, so it looks like a terrible 5. 2 times 1 is 2, and I add my 1 zero. 3 times 2 is 6, and I'm going to look at my zeros. There's 2 zeros there, so I'm going to add 2 zeros. 3 times 5 is 15, so I'm going to put my 15 down. And the number of zeros is 1, and then my 3 times 2 is 6. I'm going to put that down there. So again, as always, that we've shown you before, you write down all your numbers. I find it easier to write them in order from least to greatest because then I know that I haven't missed any. You might choose to just write them row by row. That's okay, whatever works for you. And I add all these up, and when I do add them up, I end up with 3,276. But this is where my decimal now is important. So I go back to my original values, and I say how many numbers were there before the decimal. And in this case, one number was there before the decimal, and there are none here. So I know that I have to put that decimal back after one digit. So I go to the end of my value here, and I go one digit in, and that's where my decimal point has to be, because here it's one digit after the decimal. So my decimal has to go in right over here. So it's not 3,000. The answer ends up being 327.6. And again, you can do this using the other methods. I'm going to really quickly show you the other method on the other side of the screen. So if I go ahead and I put my numbers, and again, in this case, unlike the addition, I don't line up my decimals, I line up my last digit. So that's something to remember. Unlike addition and subtraction, where we talked about lining up decimals, we don't line up the decimals, we line up the last digit. So it's the last digit that appears, that's the one that we line up, and then we go ahead and we multiply. So I'm going to have my multiplication sign there, that's kind of important to me. And again, you can draw those lines if they help you to separate those numbers in order to do the math a little easier, and that's okay. You don't have to. I like to put that in because it gives me a little bit more guidance. So my first is 3 times 2, and 3 times 2 is 6. I put that down. I go 3 times 5. 3 times 5 is 15. I put down my 1s. I carry my 10s. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. Okay, then I keep going and I do my 1s. And I'm just going to change color here. So 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. So I've gotten all my digits down. And then I go ahead and I add. And so I know that 6 and an x is 6. 5 plus 2 is going to be 7. 7 plus 5 is 12. So I put down my 2, I carry my 1, and my 2 plus 1 is 3. So again, in order to put my decimal, I go back to my original values. I look at both of these original values and I say how many numbers came before the decimal. And on the top value, there is 1 number before the decimal. On the second value, there are none. So I know I have to come in 1 space on my final number. So I go back to my final answer and I go from here to here and I say my decimal has to go here. So my answer again is 327.6. So I want you to now try this question. So I've shown you how to do it with a decimal. I want you to go ahead and I want you to pause the video and try it and then come back and check if you've gotten it correct. Okay, so welcome back. And this time I'm just going to show you really quickly the multiplication method. If you've done the box method, remember to just go back to the previous video and check if it's correct. But let's do the regular multiplication method so we can see it really quickly. And again, I draw my lines in because that helps me out. You don't have to. You can just do it the traditional way without the lines. So I go, what's 4 times 5? Again, you can use your multiplication table if you'd like, but you feel free. If you know it, excellent. It's 20, so I put down my 0, my 1s, I carry my 10s, and then I go, what is 4 times 3? It's 12, and then add 2, 12, 13, and 14. Put down my 4, and carry my 1. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. Okay, then I go down to the next. I'm just going to change colors. 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 2 is 2. And then I go ahead and I add that up, and I end up with a 0 in the first value. 5 plus 4 is going to be 9. 9 plus 3, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And the great method when you're adding large numbers to small numbers is put the large number in your head. So I put the 9 in my head and I added the 3. So 9 went up top, and then 10, 11, 12, and that made it a little bit easier. And then 2 plus 1 is 3. And so I end up with that value again, and this time in order to find out where my decimal is, I go back to my original values again. So I go back here and I say, where is that decimal? So the decimal is 1 and 2 values in, and there are none on this space. So that means my answer is going to be 2 values in. That's where my decimal is going to go. So I go to my original number, I go 1 and 2. This is where my decimal has to go. So my final answer is 32.90. Okay, and then I'm going to leave you with, so I'm giving you a word problem. So we did go to Mayfield today, and I want you to kind of think about that. So we went to Mayfield on a field trip to see a play. The total cost per student, including the ticket and the bus ride, was $7.46. I did make that number up. It is not the correct number, but we're just going to do it for the sake of doing some math. If we had 74 students attend the trip, how much did it cost for the total trip? So I want you to figure out this answer, and then I want you to come back and show it to me tomorrow. Okay, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.